Some cartoons just refuse to die. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Scooby-Doo, they get reboot after reboot. But then, there are the forgotten ones. The shows that had all the potential in the world, but got cancelled way too soon. Today, we're counting down the top 10 underrated cartoons from the 80s and 90s that ended before their time. And some of these, fans are still furious about them decades later. Oh, and quick heads up, if you want to rewatch some of these lost classics, I dropped a link in the description where you can grab the DVDs and relive them for yourself. And if you love videos like this and want to help keep them coming, consider hitting that super thanks button. Every bit of support helps me keep digging up these forgotten cartoon gems for you. So buckle up, because this isn't just nostalgia, it's heartbreak. And wait until you see which show literally ended on a cliffhanger with no resolution. Let's jump in. At number 10, Biker Mice from Mars, 1993 to 1996. First up, we've got Biker Mice from Mars. Now imagine Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but instead of turtles, you've got 3 giant biker mice from outer space. Throttle, Moto, and Vinny, decked out in their leather jackets, full of attitude, and riding motorcycles that every 90s kid wanted to own. This show had everything: over-the-top action, hilarious one-liners, and villains that were just the right kind of ridiculous. The main bad guy, Lawrence Limburger, was literally a fish-faced alien disguised as a corrupt businessman. A not-so-subtle dig at corporate greed and environmental destruction. That's right, the show wasn't just about cool bikes and laser battles. It actually snuck in themes about pollution, saving the planet, and fighting against exploitation, long before Captain Planet made it mainstream. And here's a wild fact. While the show struggled to take off in the US, it was huge overseas, especially in the UK. Kids across Europe went crazy for it, to the point where merchandise, toys, and even a video game based on the show became bestsellers over there. In fact, it even got a short-lived 2006 reboot that barely made a ripple in the States, but once again found more love abroad. But here's the frustrating part. Just when Biker Mice was carving out its own cult following in the 90s, it was gone. No big finale, no proper send-off. Just 3 seasons and out. Fans never got the closure they deserved, and the storylines that were teased in the final episodes were left completely unfinished. But if you think that's frustrating, wait until you hear about a show that came from the very same creators behind Thundercats. It had dazzling visuals, a killer villain, and should have been just as iconic. Instead, it got overshadowed so badly that most kids today don't even know it existed. Number 9, Silverhawks, 1986. Coming in at number 9 is Silverhawks. Now, if you grew up on Thundercats, this should have been your next obsession. It was made by the same studio, Rankin Bass, and had the exact same formula. A team of heroes with wild designs, a massive villain, and a constant battle between good and evil. But this time, instead of cat warriors on a distant planet, you had half-human, half-metal heroes patrolling deep space. The concept was incredible. These cybernetic heroes had wings, retractable weapons, and one of the coolest transformations in animation at the time. They fought against Monstar, a galactic mob boss who could literally transform into a hulking armored beast under the light of a red sun. The look of the show was ahead of its time. Sleek, futuristic, and full of neon-colored energy beams that screamed 80s sci-fi. So why didn't it take off like Thundercats? Timing. By the mid-80s, the toy cartoon craze was already overcrowded. Between Transformers, G.I. Joe, and He-Man, kids' toy aisles were saturated. The Silverhawks toy line didn't sell nearly as well as expected, and since these shows lived or died by toy sales, the plug was pulled after just 65 episodes. Still, Silverhawks deserves recognition. It took the Thundercats formula, gave it a space opera makeover, and delivered one of the most underrated villains of the decade. But because it never broke through the way its sibling show did, most kids barely even remember it. And if you thought Silverhawks got overshadowed, the next cartoon on our list had one of the coolest catchphrases of all time, and a villain so creepy he could have walked right out of a horror movie. But unfortunately, it disappeared way too fast. At number 8, Centurions, 1986.
Becoming man and machine, power extreme. Max Ray, brilliant sea operations commander.
Power extreme. That was the battle cry of the Centurions. And if you were a kid in the 80s, chances are you shouted it at least once. The idea behind this cartoon was pure genius. A team of elite soldiers wearing exosuits that allowed them to fuse with modular weapon systems, turning them into walking tanks, jet fighters, or even naval assault machines. The core team, Ace McCloud, the pilot, Max Ray, the sea operations expert, and Jake Rockwell, the land warrior, were basically action figures brought to life. And that was exactly the point. The show was tailor-made to sell toys. Each modular attachment on the show was something you could buy and snap onto your figure. But while the toys were clever, they never sold in the same numbers as Transformers or G.I. Joe. Which is a shame, because the show itself was way more imaginative than people give it credit for. The villains, led by the half-man, half-machine Doc Terror, were straight-up nightmare fuel. His design, with exposed robotics, wires, and his terrifying cyborg face, was more fitting for a horror flick than Saturday morning cartoons. So why did it end so quickly? Like so many shows from this era, it got lost in the flood of toy-driven programming. Only 65 episodes were produced, and then it vanished. No big finale, no movie tie-in, just another great concept cut short by corporate decisions. But if you thought Centurions deserved more seasons, wait until you hear about the next show. It was a space western with a Native American hero, and it did something no cartoon had ever dared to do. It showed a child die from drugs. Number 7, BraveStarr, 1987 to 1988. BraveStarr was one of the last big swings from Filmation, the studio behind He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. But instead of swords and sorcery, this show gave kids a futuristic space western. The main hero, Marshall BraveStarr, was a Native American lawman with the powers of animals. Eyes of the hawk, ears of the wolf, strength of the bear, and speed of the puma. That alone made it stand out. In the 80s, you just didn't see many Native American leads in cartoons. But BraveStarr wasn't afraid to push boundaries. The show tackled issues of prejudice, cultural respect, and even substance abuse. In one infamous episode titled "The Price," a young boy dies from an overdose after taking a dangerous drug. Yes, you heard that right. An actual death in a Saturday morning cartoon. BraveStarr holds the child in his arms and tells viewers that drugs can kill. It was shocking, emotional, and way ahead of its time. So why did it fail? Timing and money. By the late 80s, Filmation was struggling financially, and BraveStarr's toy line didn't sell well enough to keep the studio afloat. The show only lasted one season, along with a direct-to-video movie, and then it was gone. To this day, fans remember it for its bold storytelling and unique mix of Western and sci-fi. It was unlike anything else on TV. But because it didn't last, it became one of the great lost gems of the 80s. And if you thought that was bold, the next show had everything going for it. Vehicles that transformed, secret bases, and epic battles. It should have been a hit on par with Transformers and G.I. Joe, but instead, it flamed out after just 2 seasons. At number 6, M.A.S.K, 1985 to 1986.
The mission and Spectrum's got such supervision.
M.A.S.K, short for Mobile Armored Strike Command, and yes, they spelled command with a K because it was the 80s, was the ultimate mashup between G.I. Joe and Transformers. You had a covert team of heroes with helmets that gave them special powers, and vehicles that could transform into completely different combat machines. Cars that turned into jets, motorcycles that split into helicopters, even trucks that became battle stations. On paper, it was unbeatable. The toys were fantastic, the premise was rock solid, and the show even tried to weave in longer story arcs instead of simple standalone episodes. Kids who saw it absolutely loved it. But here's the crazy part. It just didn't catch on in the US the way Hasbro had hoped. The series only lasted 2 seasons, with the second season focusing more on racing than battles, which felt like a watered-down version of what made it popular in the first place. Fans didn't want races. They wanted transforming vehicles, secret missions, and epic combat. The change hurt the brand, and toy sales took a nosedive. Still, the legacy of M.A.S.K refuses to die. The fan base is so loyal that people are still campaigning for a reboot. There are even whispers that Hasbro might fold M.A.S.K into its Transformers universe one day. Imagine Optimus Prime fighting side by side with Matt Tracker. That's the crossover fans have been begging for. But while M.A.S.K ended too soon, at least it wrapped up its action. The next show on our list didn't just end early. It left behind imagery so terrifying that parents demanded it be pulled from television altogether. Number 5, Inhumanoids, 1986.
When the great wind blows, you must stand or fall.
Redlin, even your mighty people did not fight alone in the last great war.
Inhumanoids was not for the faint of heart. This was the cartoon that made kids check under their beds. On the surface, it was about a team of scientists called Earth Corps who built high-tech suits to battle monsters buried deep within the Earth. But the monsters themselves, they were pure nightmare fuel. You had Decompose, a skeletal creature who could trap people inside his ribcage and turn them into zombies. Metlar, a lava-spitting giant who looked like he was forged in hell. And Tendril, a writhing mass of tentacles that strangled anything in its path. These designs were more fitting for an R-rated horror movie than Saturday morning TV. Parents were outraged. They flooded networks with complaints, saying the show was too scary, too violent, and too graphic for kids. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The villains were grotesque. Heroes were routinely tortured. Entire cities were destroyed. It was a monster show disguised as a toy commercial. So it's no surprise that it was canceled after just 1 season. But for those who watched it, Inhumanoids burned itself into their memories. It proved that cartoons didn't always have to play it safe. They could push the limits of fear. And if you thought Inhumanoids was dark, wait until you hear about the next cartoon. It didn't terrify kids with monsters. It traumatized them with an ending so bleak that fans are still arguing about what it meant. At number 4, Mighty M.A.S.K, 1993 to 1994.
It is over.
Mighty M.A.S.K started as a toy line, basically Polly Pocket for boys. You had tiny playsets shaped like monsters, volcanoes, and dungeons that opened up to reveal little battle scenes. When they adapted it into a cartoon, nobody expected much. But what we got was one of the most intelligent and surprisingly dark cartoons of the 90s. The show followed Max, an ordinary kid who discovers a magical cap that lets him travel through portals across space and time. With him were his mentors, Virgil, a wise bird-like being, and Norman, a Conan-style warrior voiced by Richard Mall. Their enemy was Skullmaster, a demonic villain voiced by the legendary Tim Curry, who brought an insane level of menace to every episode. At first glance, it looked like a fun Adventure of the Week series, but the themes quickly turned dark. Cities fell, entire civilizations were wiped out, the stakes were massive, and then came the finale. In the final episode, Max fails to stop Skullmaster, and the world collapses into chaos. To fix it, Max has to use his cap to reset time all the way back to the beginning of the series, creating a loop where he's doomed to live the entire adventure over and over, forever. No happy ending, no resolution, just a tragic, mind-bending cycle. For kids expecting a Saturday morning wrap-up, this was devastating. It turned Mighty Max into one of the boldest and most underrated cartoons of its era. But as confusing as that finale was, the next show didn't even get one. Its epic quest was left unfinished, leaving fans hanging for over 30 years. Number 3. The Pirates of Darkwater, 1991 to 1993.
This curse on my heart has been aboard the Maelstrom, and I didn't know about it. And you?
The Pirates of Darkwater was one of the most ambitious animated series of the early 90s. Set on the dying world of Myr, it followed a young prince named Ren who had to gather 13 magical treasures to stop a mysterious substance called Darkwater from consuming the planet. Everything about this show screamed epic. The animation was gorgeous, with hand-painted backgrounds and fluid action sequences. The story was serialized, each episode building on the last, which was rare for kids' TV at the time. And the tone was darker, more mature, more in line with fantasy novels than toy commercials. But the one thing it didn't have? A proper ending. The heroes only collected 8 of the 13 treasures before the show was abruptly canceled after just 21 episodes. The main quest, the entire point of the series, was left unfinished. Fans never got to see the conclusion. And decades later, it's still one of the most infamous unresolved cliffhangers in cartoon history. To make matters worse, the show had everything going for it. Great characters, a strong villain in Bloth, a massive fantasy world waiting to be explored. It could have been the great animated adventure of the 90s. Instead, it became one of TV's biggest what-ifs. And as painful as that was, the next cartoon went even further. It wasn't just ambitious, it was groundbreaking. A war drama for kids that tackled politics, racism, and rebellion. And it got cut short just when it was getting good. At number 2, Exo Squad, 1993 to 1994.
Tell him Matthew Marcus knew how to die.
If there's one show on this list that was simply too smart for its own time, it's Exo Squad. On the surface, it was about soldiers in high-tech exosuits fighting battles in space. But underneath, it was a full-on war epic about oppression, racism, and the consequences of slavery. The Neo-Sapiens, genetically engineered humans created to serve, rise up in rebellion against their creators. What followed was a brutal, serialized story of betrayal, propaganda, and survival. Characters didn't just vanish between episodes, they died. The violence was real. The stakes were massive. This wasn't light Saturday morning fun. This was science fiction with something to say. It was essentially Battlestar Galactica meets Saving Private Ryan, but made for kids. And maybe that was the problem. The show demanded too much from its young audience, and networks didn't know how to market it. After just 2 seasons, Exo Squad was canceled. Yet those who watched it never forgot it. To this day, fans argue that Exo Squad paved the way for shows like Gundam Wing and even Avatar: The Last Airbender. It proved that cartoons could tell complex, serialized stories long before that became the norm. But even Exo Squad didn't hurt as bad as the #1 cartoon on our list. Because this one wasn't just smart, it wasn't just ambitious, it was Disney's chance to rival Batman the animated series. And yet, they pulled the plug far too soon. Number 1, Gargoyles, 1994 to 1997. At the top of our list is Gargoyles. And honestly, how could it not be? This show wasn't just another kid's cartoon. It was a dark, gothic saga about betrayal, redemption, and survival. The story followed a clan of gargoyles cursed to sleep for 1,000 years before awakening in modern-day New York City. Led by Goliath, they tried to navigate a world that feared and misunderstood them while fighting against villains both human and supernatural. The writing was Shakespearean in scope, literally, since many of the storylines were inspired by Shakespeare's plays. The cast was legendary, featuring voices from Star Trek: The Next Generation, like Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis. And the tone? It was bold, serious, and layered in ways Disney had never dared to attempt before. So why didn't it last? Because Disney didn't know what to do with it. The show didn't fit their family-friendly brand. And while it had a loyal fan base, executives wanted something lighter that could sell more toys. After just 3 seasons, the show was gone. And to add insult to injury, the final season, produced without the original creator, was a watered-down version that fans don't even consider canon. To this day, fans are still campaigning for Gargoyles to return. Petitions, rewatch campaigns, even rumors of reboots pop up every few years. But nothing has ever captured the magic of the original. If Disney had kept faith in Gargoyles, it could have been their answer to Batman the animated series. Instead, it remains the greatest canceled too soon cartoon of the 90s. So there you have it, the top 10 underrated 80s and 90s cartoons that ended way too soon. But I want to hear from you. Which of these cancellations hurt you the most? Was it Gargoyles, Pirates of Darkwater, or maybe Mighty M.A.S.K? Do you agree with the list, or do you think something else should have been number 1? Drop your pick in the comments, and let's see which show wins the robbed too soon crown. And hey, these videos take hours to make, so if you enjoy them, hit that super thanks or consider joining as a channel member. It helps me keep bringing you more deep dives every week. And trust me, you do not want to miss my next video, because we're talking about a 90s cartoon that actually predicted the future of technology. That one is going to blow your mind. We'll see you next time.